On a dark, fateful night, the once proud black billionaire family was publicly shamed, their opulent image shattered in a single, devastating moment. The raw humiliation on their faces ignited whispers and left everyone questioning the true source of their power. Uncover the explosive secret behind their fall from grace, a secret that will pull you deep into this riveting story. Watch until the end to see how this incredible story unfolds, and let us know what time you're watching today. The rain fell in steady sheets as the airport's lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, a silent witness to secrets and whispered promises. In the hushed corridor of Terminal C, Ava moved with a measured grace, her navy uniform pressed crisp against her skin. Each step echoed against the cold tiles, a metronome counting down the moments before the next flight's departure. Tonight, the air felt charged with anticipation, a feeling that Ava could neither explain nor ignore. She paused at a large window overlooking the tarmac, where jets sat silently like slumbering beasts waiting to awaken. Outside, the storm churned the dark sky, its distant rumbles mingling with the steady hiss of rain. It was during moments like these that Ava's thoughts turned inward, reflecting on the nature of fate and the strange dance between duty and destiny. The soft murmur of travelers and the occasional clatter of luggage provided a background rhythm to her silent contemplation. Ava's gaze shifted as a low, almost imperceptible vibration echoed through the hall. It was not the sound of the storm, but something else, a subtle tremor that seemed to emanate from deep within the building itself. Her skin prickled with the sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. Though the building was large and crowded, a sense of isolation crept in, as if the airport had become a stage for secrets too weighty to share openly. Ava tightened her grip on the small leather-bound notebook in her pocket, a keepsake from better times, and took a slow, deliberate breath. Moments later, as she walked toward the gate where Flight 407 was about to board, a quiet murmur of conversation reached her ears. The words were soft and laced with a tension that belied their simplicity. Two colleagues exchanged hushed remarks near the crew room. "They say tonight is different," one whispered, his eyes darting nervously. "There's something in the air, like the calm before a storm." The other only nodded, too anxious to speak further. Ava listened without engaging, her mind already weaving possibilities from fragments of conversation. In her line of work, every unusual sound, every small hint of unease, carried the weight of hidden truths. She recalled a similar night months ago when a routine flight transformed into a turning point in her life, a reminder that the ordinary often concealed the extraordinary. As she reached the boarding area, her eyes fell upon a group of passengers who stood apart from the usual crowd. They carried themselves with an air of refined elegance, each movement measured and deliberate. Their attire was impeccable, and their expressions hinted at a deep, unspoken confidence. Ava noted the subtle glances they exchanged, a language of assurance and unity that suggested they were not mere travelers, but individuals of significant means. Their presence was almost magnetic, drawing curious stares from other passengers, yet exuding an unyielding calm. Though Ava had seen many high-profile guests in her years of service, something about this group unsettled her. There was a quiet intensity in the way they observed the world around them, as if every detail held meaning. Their eyes, dark and searching, seemed to look beyond the present moment, into a realm of hidden power and unspoken history. She mentally tagged them as the Carter family, a name that had begun to circulate quietly among the staff, whispered with equal parts admiration and apprehension. Ava had learned that the Carters were not only affluent, but also enigmatic, their fortune and influence woven into the very fabric of the airline industry. Ava's task was clear: ensure that every passenger experienced a safe and comfortable journey. But as she approached the group to offer her customary greeting, her mind raced with questions. How did a family so shrouded in mystery come to possess such power? And why did their presence tonight feel like a harbinger of change? Her questions, though unanswered, added weight to the air around her. A soft chime of the intercom drew her attention, and a calm, measured voice announced the imminent boarding of Flight 407. The announcement stirred the quiet tension in the hall, and the passengers began to shift with purpose. Ava moved with the flow of the crowd, her eyes never leaving the Carters. In that fleeting moment, she sensed an undercurrent of something far deeper than mere wealth, a destiny that was intertwined with the very soul of the airline. Inside the cabin, the soft glow of overhead lights cast elongated shadows on the polished seats. The hum of the engines and the quiet murmur of conversation blended into a lullaby of anticipation. Ava checked every detail with meticulous care, her thoughts lingering on the mysterious energy that seemed to pulse through the walls of the plane. It was as if the very metal of the aircraft whispered tales of past journeys and unseen adventures. In one quiet corner, away from the bustle of the boarding passengers, Ava allowed herself a moment of introspection. The night was a canvas of shifting emotions, a blend of calm determination and subtle dread. She recalled the warnings of a seasoned colleague who once said, "In our line of work, the skies hold more than just clouds and stars. They hold memories, regrets, and sometimes the seeds of fate." Those words echoed in her mind as she arranged the safety instructions with a practiced precision that belied the storm raging both outside and within. As the final boarding call faded into the background, Ava prepared for what was to come. The world beyond the cabin doors was vast and unpredictable, and tonight, every decision mattered. The presence of the Carter family was a reminder that life rarely followed the script one expected. Their eyes, filled with unspoken promises, hinted at a narrative that would soon unfold, a tale of pride, misjudgment, and a twist of fate that would leave everyone reeling. Even as the storm outside intensified, a quiet resolve settled within Ava. She was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that every detail, no matter how small, played a part in the unfolding drama of life. In the stillness before the departure, as shadows danced on polished floors and the murmurs of anxious passengers rose and fell like the tide, Ava embraced the uncertainty of the moment. Her heart beat in time with the distant thunder, each pulse a silent vow to honor her duty, no matter where destiny might lead. In that charged moment, the night seemed to stretch endlessly before her, a path marked by both promise and peril. The air was heavy with the scent of rain and the faint aroma of coffee from a nearby kiosk, blending into a sensory mosaic that defined the evening. As the plane's doors prepared to close, the unspoken tension among the passengers grew palpable, a prelude to an encounter that would alter the course of their lives. Ava's eyes met those of a young crew member, a silent understanding passing between them. There was no need for words. The shared glances said enough about the uncharted territory they were about to navigate. The narrative of the night had already been set in motion, and every heartbeat carried the weight of an impending revelation. Little did they know that in the span of a few short minutes, the story of power, prejudice, and unexpected ownership would begin to unravel in ways that defied all expectations. As the boarding process drew to a close and the cabin lights dimmed further, the first act of a grand, unfolding drama reached its delicate pause, a moment of stillness before the inevitable storm. In the silence that followed, the echoes of fate whispered promises of change, leaving behind a trail of questions that would soon demand answers in the journey ahead. Ava had always believed that every person carried a story inside them, a tapestry woven from hopes, fears, and dreams. As she moved through the quiet corridors of the airport, she often wondered about the unseen narratives of those around her. Tonight, as the soft hum of engines and murmurs of passengers filled the air, her thoughts wandered to her own journey. Ava was known for her gentle smile and unwavering professionalism, yet beneath that calm exterior lay a heart that yearned for recognition and a life beyond the routine of boarding calls and safety demonstrations. Her dedication to her job stemmed from a deep-seated belief that every detail mattered, that every small act of care could change someone's day. But alongside this commitment was a restlessness, a desire to break free from the confines of the ordinary and embrace something larger than herself. Ava's world was one of endless skies and fleeting encounters, and she often wondered if her life would ever mirror the grand stories she read about or saw in movies. In those quiet moments between flights, she dreamed of a destiny that would defy the mundane. Among the many faces she encountered each day, the Carter family had always occupied a unique space in her thoughts. Even before tonight, whispers of their name had circulated among the staff, wrapped in equal measures of awe and caution. Malcolm Carter, the patriarch, was a man whose presence commanded respect. Tall and dignified, he carried himself with an air of quiet authority. His eyes, dark and reflective, seemed to hold countless secrets of a life lived on his own terms. Those who met him often remarked on the firmness of his handshake and the subtle kindness in his smile, a blend of strength and compassion that made him both formidable and approachable. Beside him stood Clarissa Carter, whose elegance was matched only by her determination. Clarissa's grace was not merely in her refined manners or the perfect cut of her tailor dress. It was in the way she listened intently, as if every word spoken was a clue to a larger mystery. Her eyes, warm and perceptive, could convey both reassurance and quiet challenge, hinting at a mind as sharp as it was empathetic. To many, she represented the heart of the family, a beacon of stability in a world that often seemed uncertain. Their son, Jamal, was the embodiment of youthful confidence. With a spark of mischief and intelligence in his eyes, he had already begun to carve out his own identity, one that balanced the legacy of his family with the promise of his individuality. Jamal's charm was effortless. He moved through life with a blend of humor and determination that made it impossible not to be drawn to him. Yet, beneath his light-hearted banter, there was a hint of responsibility that belied his age, a silent acknowledgement of the weight his name carried in circles far beyond his immediate world. Ava's encounters with the Carters had always been fleeting, marked by brief exchanges of courteous nods and polite smiles. But tonight, as she prepared for the next leg of her journey, the thought of the Carter family stirred a complex mix of admiration, curiosity, and an unspoken apprehension. There was an unyielding air of mystery around them that both intrigued and unsettled her. It wasn't just their wealth or status that set them apart. It was the palpable sense that they were driven by a purpose known only to themselves. In the midst of the bustling terminal, Ava's mind replayed snippets of past conversations with her colleagues. They had spoken in hushed tones about the Carters' influence in the airline industry, about deals and decisions made in quiet boardrooms that shaped the fate of countless lives. For Ava, who had always taken pride in her role, the idea that the very passengers she served could hold such power was both fascinating and daunting. She began to see herself not just as a flight attendant, but as a small yet significant part of a much larger narrative, one where every act, no matter how minute, could ripple out in unexpected ways. Her initial goal that night was simple yet profound: to serve with excellence and maintain the order and safety that her job demanded. Yet, the undercurrent of anticipation and the enigmatic presence of the Carter family hinted at a conflict that was destined to surface. Deep inside, Ava felt the stirrings of a challenge, a test of her integrity, and her ability to navigate a world where appearances could be deceiving. It was as if fate had drawn her into a delicate dance with destiny, one where each step could either lead to a moment of triumph or a cascade of unforeseen consequences. As she moved among the passengers, her interactions were marked by an attentive kindness that came naturally to her. She exchanged brief, genuine smiles with travelers and offered a few encouraging words to a nervous family waiting to board. With each encounter, Ava's inner monologue reminded her of the responsibility she bore, not just for the physical safety of those around her, but for their emotional well-being as well. The duty she carried was one of guardianship, and in that role, every gesture mattered. The relationships she formed with her colleagues were a testament to the unspoken bonds of shared experience. There was Marcus, a younger crew member whose youthful enthusiasm often brought a refreshing energy to the team. His optimism was infectious, and despite his inexperience, he carried a determination to learn and grow. Then there was Elena, a seasoned attendant whose quiet wisdom and compassionate nature had guided Ava during her early days on the job. Elena's steady presence was like a lighthouse in the fog of uncertainty, and her subtle mentorship had left an indelible mark on Ava's approach to life and service. Yet, even as these relationships grounded her, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous was about to unfold. The Carters, with their aura of mystery and the weight of unspoken power, represented a turning point, a crossroads where the seemingly ordinary could transform into something extraordinary. Ava's own internal conflict simmered quietly, the desire to prove herself against the backdrop of the extraordinary, and the fear that one misstep could unravel the delicate balance she had worked so hard to maintain. In her quieter moments, Ava recalled a personal promise she had made to herself long ago, a vow to never let fear dictate her actions. This promise was her guiding star, a beacon that shone even in the darkest hours of doubt. She had always believed that life was a series of choices, each one an opportunity to embrace change and challenge the status quo. Tonight, that conviction was put to the test as she found herself facing the unknown, with the weight of both personal aspirations and professional duty pressing upon her. It was in this charged atmosphere of expectation and quiet defiance that the characters began to reveal themselves in fuller detail. Ava's gentle strength and keen intuition met the enigmatic presence of the Carters, a family whose reputation was built on secrets, influence, and an unyielding determination to control their destiny. As the moments ticked by, each individual in this unfolding drama seemed poised on the brink of transformation, their lives intertwined by a series of choices that would soon redefine their paths. In that delicate balance between duty and desire, between tradition and the promise of change, Ava and the Carters stood as symbols of the intricate dance of fate. The stage was set, the characters fully in place, and the first hints of conflict had begun to emerge, a silent, powerful undercurrent that promised to challenge every assumption and alter the course of their intertwined lives. A hush fell over the cabin as the plane's doors sealed shut, and the hum of the engines began to swell. The quiet, steady pulse of the aircraft was suddenly broken by a murmur of discontent coming from the back of the cabin. Ava, busy checking on passengers and ensuring all safety protocols were met, caught a hint of raised voices behind her. At first, it was a barely noticeable disturbance, but in moments it grew into an uproar that could not be ignored. A young man from the Carter family, normally reserved and composed, stood abruptly from his seat. His eyes flashed with anger as he questioned the seating arrangements with a force that surprised even his own family. His tone was not one of casual displeasure. It was as if he felt deeply wronged by an unseen hand. Ava's heart skipped a beat as she moved swiftly toward him, her voice calm and measured despite the storm of emotions she felt rising within. "Sir, please settle down." "Let me help you," she said softly, trying to defuse the tension before it escalated further. But the situation spiraled quickly. The young man's words cut sharply through the cabin air, and his frustration ignited a chain reaction. Clarissa Carter, who had been quietly observing from her seat, rose to speak in defense of her son. Her voice, though composed, trembled with an undercurrent of indignation. "There is no mistake here," she stated firmly, her gaze challenging anyone who dared oppose her family. The tone of the exchange shifted, drawing the attention of several nearby passengers whose whispers of surprise grew louder by the second. Ava felt the weight of the moment press on her. Her training urged her to restore calm and order, yet she sensed that this was no ordinary dispute. The emotions in the cabin were raw and volatile, hinting at deeper issues beneath the surface. As she tried once more to mediate the conflict, a sudden, piercing announcement came over the intercom, alerting everyone that the flight was about to depart. The announcement, intended to smooth over any lingering unrest, only served to underscore the urgency of the situation. With the situation growing unmanageable, Ava made a decision in a split second that would change everything. In a firm but steady tone, she announced that the Carter family would be required to leave the plane. "For the safety and comfort of all passengers, I must ask you to deplane immediately," she declared, her voice echoing through the cabin. The words fell like a gavel, and for a long moment, silence reigned. The Carters exchanged shocked looks, their faces betraying both disbelief and rising anger. As the Carter family was escorted off the plane, the atmosphere shifted abruptly. The cabin that had once been filled with the routine chatter of travel now pulsed with tension and uncertainty. Ava stood by the door, her hand trembling slightly as she watched them leave. In that fleeting moment, a deep sense of foreboding settled over her. Had she done the right thing? Was this decision merely an enforcement of duty, or was it driven by something more personal, a hidden instinct to challenge a greater injustice? The impact of the disruptive event rippled through the cabin. Passengers murmured amongst themselves, their eyes shifting between Ava and the empty seats where the Carters had once sat. The removal of such a prominent family was not a trivial matter. It had sent shockwaves through the established order of the flight, and soon, through the industry itself. In the quiet moments after the incident, Ava found herself wrestling with conflicting emotions. A part of her felt relief that the disturbance had been contained, yet another part was haunted by the lingering questions of why the event had escalated so unexpectedly. As the plane began its slow roll down the runway, Ava retreated to a quiet corner of the galley, seeking a moment of solitude. The steady drumming of the rain outside the window merged with the inner beating of her heart, and in that reflective silence, she recalled the hushed conversations she had overheard earlier that day. Whispers among the crew had hinted at the hidden influence of powerful families in the airline world, names spoken in reverent tones and laden with mystery. The Carters, it seemed, were not just a wealthy family, but custodians of secrets that could shake the foundations of the industry. Ava's thoughts swirled as she questioned the true nature of the incident. The removal of the Carter family from the plane felt like the opening move of a much larger game, a prelude to conflicts that reached far beyond the confines of a single flight. The incident had ignited a spark, and as she sat there, she sensed the early tremors of a looming storm. There was a hint of revenge and hidden agendas in the actions of both the Carters and those who had supported their removal. Every whispered conversation in the cabin now carried the weight of impending conflict, and Ava knew that this was only the beginning. A senior crew member, his face lined with years of experience, came over and spoke quietly, his words laden with both caution and sympathy. "Ava, sometimes our actions in the heat of the moment set off chains we cannot foresee," he said, his tone gentle yet earnest. His words echoed the unspoken truth that the consequences of tonight's events might extend far beyond a single disruption. The crew member's quiet warning felt like an omen, a reminder that in the world of power and privilege, even the smallest act of defiance could have seismic repercussions. Standing by the closed door where the Carters had once sat, Ava felt a strange mix of defiance and vulnerability. The decision she had made, driven by a commitment to safety and fairness, now seemed to carry an invisible burden. The storm outside had grown louder, its relentless roar a mirror to the turbulent emotions inside her. Every drop of rain that hit the window was like a countdown to a future she could neither predict nor control. As the plane took off into the dark, tempestuous sky, the initial thrill of asserting her authority began to fade, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. The disruptive event was a door opening to a world of hidden agendas and unspoken rivalries. Ava's mind replayed the incident over and over, each retelling deepening her sense of foreboding. She wondered if the Carters' removal was a mistake or if it had been inevitable, a move that would force her to confront powerful forces far beyond her control. In that charged atmosphere, every face in the cabin seemed to bear a secret, every whispered comment a clue to the larger conflict now looming on the horizon. The removal of the Carter family was more than a disciplinary action. It was a catalyst that set the stage for an unfolding drama. Ava realized that the coming days would test not only her resolve and professionalism, but also her very understanding of power, justice, and the delicate balance that held her world together. As the flight progressed and the initial shock began to settle into a heavy silence, Ava resolved to carry on with her duties. Yet, in the quiet recesses of her mind, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The disruptive event had shattered the calm of a routine journey, revealing fissures in the facade of order and decorum that had long been taken for granted. In its wake lay the promise of deeper conflicts, a challenge that would force everyone on board, and perhaps even beyond, to reckon with truths that had been hidden for too long. Ava took a steadying breath, her eyes fixed on the dim cabin lights as they flickered like distant stars in a vast, uncertain sky. The night had given way to a new reality, one where each decision could alter the course of events in ways she had never imagined. With a silent vow to face whatever came next, Ava resumed her work, her every step now infused with a newfound determination. The inciting moment of tonight had not only disrupted the flight, it had ignited a spark that promised to blaze into a conflict that would change everything, and Ava was now at the very heart of it all. A heavy silence clung to the cabin long after the Carter family had been escorted off the plane. The murmurs of passengers had faded into an uneasy quiet, and the routine hum of the engines now felt like the ticking of a clock counting down to an uncertain future. Ava moved slowly down the aisle, her mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. Her duty had always been clear, to ensure the safety and comfort of every traveler. Yet now, that simple goal was tangled with the repercussions of the decision she had made. In the immediate aftermath, a shadow had fallen over her work. A stern-faced supervisor, Mr. Stevens, had quietly pulled her aside near the galley. His voice, measured but laced with disapproval, questioned her judgment. "Ava, the Carter family is not just any group of passengers. They are influential figures, and their removal from the flight has not gone unnoticed. We must maintain order, but we also have a reputation to uphold." His words left her with a bitter taste of doubt. Had she overstepped her bounds in the name of safety? Was her instinct for fairness now jeopardizing everything she had worked for? As the plane began its ascent into the dark, swirling sky, Ava's thoughts turned inward. She recalled her initial promise to herself to serve with kindness and diligence, to never let fear or uncertainty undermine her actions. Yet, as the turbulence outside mirrored the unrest inside her, that promise felt fragile. In the sterile light of the cabin, Every reflection of her face in a polished metal panel seemed to ask, "What have you done?" Meanwhile, in the cramped break room of the crew, the atmosphere was charged with whispered theories and hushed conversations. Elena, the seasoned attendant who had long served as Ava's mentor, sat quietly in a corner. Her eyes, usually so warm and reassuring, were shadowed with worry. "Sometimes," Elena murmured to Marcus, a younger crew member whose eagerness to please was now tempered by the weight of recent events, "our actions have far-reaching consequences. What seemed like a clear decision in the moment can quickly spiral into a storm we cannot control." Marcus nodded, his youthful face etched with concern as he recalled the incident, the heated words, the shocked expressions, the sudden removal of a family that many believed held more power than any ordinary traveler. Ava, unable to find solace even in the break room, retreated to a quiet corner. There, she discovered a small envelope tucked away in the locker assigned to her. The handwriting on it was unfamiliar, and inside was a brief note written in clear, deliberate script. "Every decision has its echo. Stand by your truth, but be ready for the shadows it may awaken." The message sent a chill down her spine. It was as if someone had been watching, waiting for this very moment, and now the echoes of her actions were gathering strength. That single message became the first hint of a much larger obstacle, a challenge that questioned not only her immediate decision, but the very foundations of her role. The note was not merely a warning, it was a harbinger of a hidden battle that stretched far beyond the confines of a single flight. Ava's mind raced with possibilities. Could it be that the Carters were not the only ones with secrets? Was there a network of powerful interests that had been quietly maneuvering behind the scenes of the airline industry, now stirred into action by her seemingly isolated act? In the days that followed, the atmosphere on the flight and among the crew grew increasingly tense. News of the incident had spread quickly through internal channels, and rumors began to swirl about potential repercussions. Passengers who had witnessed the altercation exchanged furtive glances and whispered their own theories. One well-dressed businessman, seated a few rows ahead of Ava, muttered to his companion that the removal of the Carters might lead to a public relations nightmare for the airline, a statement that was quickly met with nervous laughter and an undercurrent of anxiety. At the same time, a subplot began to emerge from the margins of Ava's routine. A quiet passenger named Daniel, who had boarded the flight seemingly by chance, started to ask subtle questions. With gentle persistence, he inquired about the nature of the incident and the true identity of the removed family. His eyes, kind but probing, seemed to hold secrets of their own. Over the course of the flight, Daniel's inquiries revealed that he was not just any traveler, but someone who had once been closely connected with influential circles within the airline's executive branch. His presence added a layer of complexity that made Ava's heart pound with both curiosity and apprehension. Daniel's conversation hinted at conflicts within the higher echelons of the airline, a power struggle where the Carters were merely one piece of a larger, intricate puzzle. He spoke quietly of deals struck in shadowed boardrooms, of rivalries that dated back years, and of a system where loyalty and ambition often walked hand in hand with corruption. His words, delivered in the soft cadence of someone used to speaking in hushed tones, resonated with Ava. They made her realize that her initial goal of simply serving passengers was now intertwined with forces that she barely understood. Later, as the flight settled into a smoother rhythm at cruising altitude, Ava found herself engaged in a brief conversation with Marcus. The young crew member, usually so full of optimism, shared his own doubts. "I always thought our job was clear, serve and protect. But now it feels like every move we make is watched, and every decision can turn into a battle we're not ready for." His voice carried the weight of someone who had just begun to see the cracks in the veneer of everyday life. The shared moment of vulnerability between them forged a silent bond, one that promised mutual support in the face of uncertainty. Ava's thoughts kept returning to the note in her locker. It was a small piece of paper, yet it seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 warnings. In a quiet moment between checking on passengers, she whispered to herself, "I must stand by what I did, but I must also be ready to learn from every echo of it." The determination in her voice belied the tremor of anxiety that had taken hold of her heart. As the flight continued, the storm outside subsided into a persistent drizzle, and inside, the undercurrent of tension began to shape the interactions among the crew and passengers alike. The incident with the Carter family had not only challenged Ava's initial goal, it had thrown open the door to a realm of hidden conflicts where loyalty, power, and truth intertwined in ways that could not be easily unraveled. Every conversation, every whispered theory, hinted at a deeper, more dangerous game playing out behind the scenes. That night, as the plane began its descent towards its destination, Ava felt the weight of her choices settle firmly upon her shoulders. The obstacle was no longer just a disruptive incident. It had evolved into a symbol of the greater challenges ahead. The removal of the Carters was merely the spark that lit a fuse, one that would soon reveal a labyrinth of hidden agendas and powerful interests. And within that labyrinth, Ava was now an unwilling participant. In the quiet moments before landing, as she gazed out at the city, lights emerging through the soft drizzle, Ava made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth behind the shadows that now encircled her life. She would face the hidden challenges head-on, even if it meant questioning the very foundations of the world she thought she knew. The journey ahead was uncertain and fraught with dangers she could barely imagine, but in that uncertainty lay the promise of discovery, a chance to truly understand the forces that govern not only her career, but the lives of countless others. Thus, with every fiber of her being, Ava braced herself for what was to come, aware that the first turning point had only just begun. The flight was over, but the true journey, into the depths of power, intrigue, and the search for truth, was just beginning, and Ava was ready to step forward into that daunting, uncharted territory. Ava's heart still pounded from the earlier events as she stepped off the plane into the quiet, almost eerie, expanse of the airport terminal. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, casting long shadows that danced across the polished floors. Every step she took resonated like a drumbeat, echoing the urgency of the revelation that had just shattered her world. Earlier that evening, a mysterious call had unveiled a truth so staggering it seemed to freeze time. The Carter family, whom she had forcefully removed from the flight, were not merely influential guests. They were, in fact, the true owners of the airline. That single statement reverberated through her mind, transforming a moment of routine duty into the threshold of an unfolding, dangerous saga. As she made her way to a secluded corner near a row of silent seating, Ava's thoughts churned with conflicting emotions. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and stale coffee, while distant murmurs of other travelers seemed to blend with the low hum of the air conditioning. In that suspended moment, every detail became a vivid symbol of her shifting reality. The cold, white walls of the terminal felt less like a safe haven and more like the confines of a prison built by unseen powers. The revelation had forced her to confront the harsh truth. Her impulsive act was not an isolated mistake. It was a spark that had ignited a far more perilous blaze. Just then, her phone vibrated with a new message. Its text was brief, yet its impact was profound. The truth lies in what you choose to see. Trust no one. The words sent a shiver down her spine. It was as if fate itself had spoken directly to her, urging her to peel back the layers of deception that had long cloaked the inner workings of the airline. In that instant, Ava felt both the crushing weight of isolation and the fierce surge of determination. She knew that she was now enmeshed in a game of high stakes, one where every decision carried the potential for irreversible consequences. Before she could fully absorb the message, a soft voice broke the silence. Daniel, the quiet and inquisitive passenger she had encountered during the flight, appeared at her side. His deep, steady gaze met hers with a mixture of empathy and urgency. "Ava," he began quietly, "I know what you've learned is overwhelming, but there's so much more behind this than you realize." Daniel's tone was measured and sincere, and as he spoke, his words painted a picture of a hidden world, one where the Carters' ownership of the airline was merely the tip of an enormous, murky iceberg. He explained that the family's influence stretched deep into the corridors of power, intertwining with corporate rivalries, secretive boardroom deals, and alliances that defied conventional logic. As Daniel spoke, Ava's mind raced. His revelations were unsettling, but also oddly liberating. For the first time, she felt that her world was not as black and white as she had once believed. The rigid lines of duty and protocol were now blurred by the murky realities of power and betrayal. The terminal, with its stark, industrial lighting and constant hum, transformed in her perception into a stage where every whispered conversation and every furtive glance held hidden meanings. The distant, rhythmic clatter of rolling suitcases became the heartbeat of a vast, unseen machine, one that moved inexorably toward a climax she was now destined to confront. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted when Marcus, the young and usually exuberant crew member, approached with a conflicted look in his eyes. His normally bright face was now etched with lines of worry and guilt. "Ava," he said in a hushed tone, "I need to be honest with you. There are those among us who have been spoken to, people who believe that your decision has upset a delicate balance. They fear that by challenging the Carters, you have unknowingly put us all at risk." His confession struck Ava like a cold wave. Here was someone she trusted, now torn between loyalty to his duty and fear of the powerful forces gathering around her. Marcus's words resonated as a symbol of the internal fractures that were beginning to appear within the ranks, a silent testament to the betrayal and division that was creeping in. In that charged moment, Elena, the calm and steady mentor who had always provided Ava with gentle guidance, stepped forward. Her eyes, though tired, shone with a determined light. "Ava," she said softly, "sometimes the path of truth is a lonely one. But you must not let fear blind you. There are alliances here that are worth your trust, and there are those who will stand by you no matter what." Elena's reassurance offered a fragile comfort, like the soft glow of a candle in the midst of a dark, stormy night. Her presence was a reminder that even in the harshest of battles, moments of solidarity could be found. As Ava absorbed these words, the sensory details of the terminal sharpened around her. The sound of distant rain tapping against the expansive glass walls, the subtle flicker of neon lights reflected in puddles on the floor, and the murmur of voices all coalesced into a symphony of foreboding signals. The airport, usually a place of transit and routine, now felt like a living organism, its every breath and whisper imbued with secrets waiting to be unraveled. In the midst of this vivid tableau, Ava recognized that the true battle was not only against external forces, but also against the doubts that threatened to undermine her spirit. Ava's inner transformation began to crystallize as she stood there, surrounded by allies whose loyalty was now both a beacon and a battlefield. She felt the gravity of her actions settling like a mantle around her shoulders. With every new revelation and every confession of hidden loyalties, the stakes escalated beyond the confines of her former life. The revelation that the Carters owned the airline was no longer just a shocking twist. It was a call to arms, demanding that she redefine her understanding of justice and responsibility. In that pivotal moment, a surge of resolve coursed through Ava. She made a silent promise to herself. She would not be intimidated by the forces aligned against her. Instead, she would delve deeper into the shadows to uncover the full extent of the corruption and manipulation that had led to this crisis. The note in her locker, the secretive phone message, and the earnest words of Daniel, Marcus, and Elena all converge into a singular, unwavering directive: seek the truth, no matter the cost. As the terminal's ambient lights softened into the early hours of night, Ava stepped forward, leaving behind the confines of her previous doubts. With the symbolism of every sensory detail, the relentless patter of rain, the unwavering glow of neon, and the hushed, charged conversations around her, she embraced the uncertainty of her future. This was the midpoint of her journey, a moment of irrevocable change that demanded courage, clarity, and the strength to forge alliances where betrayal lurked in every corner. In that transforming hour, Ava sensed that her life was about to pivot dramatically. Every whispered secret, every subtle glance, and every tremor of distrust had built toward this climactic confrontation. And though the path ahead was fraught with peril, she no longer viewed her actions as isolated mistakes. Instead, she saw them as the first brave steps toward dismantling a system steeped in hidden power and unyielding control. With the revelation of the Carters' true influence burning like an ember in her heart, Ava resolved to stand by her truth. The air around her seemed to shimmer with the promise of change, as if the very terminal were alive with the potential for revolution. In that charged silence, amidst the symphony of the night and the pulsating beat of her own determined heart, Ava embarked on a journey that would test every fiber of her being and, ultimately, redefine her destiny. Ava's world had already begun to unravel in unexpected ways, but nothing could have prepared her for the relentless surge of challenges that now converged upon her. The soft hum of fluorescent lights in the early morning mingled with the distant sound of a city waking up, yet inside the airline's secure corridors, tension crackled like static. A heavy knock on the door of her modest apartment jolted her from restless sleep. It was Marcus, his normally warm eyes shadowed with worry and conflict. In a hushed tone, he warned her, "Ava, you must be careful. They are closing in on you." His words, meant as a plea, reverberated with a gravity that sent shivers down her spine. As she prepared for another day at work, the mounting challenges felt palpable, an invisible weight pressing on her shoulders. Every step toward the terminal was a step into a labyrinth of intrigue. The whispers in the hallways had grown louder, and her once familiar workplace now seemed charged with a sense of imminent danger. In the sterile environment of the crew lounge, Ava found herself surrounded by colleagues whose faces bore a mix of sympathy and silent admonishment. Mr. Stevens, the stern supervisor, had already called for a meeting. His gaze, usually unreadable, now carried an unmistakable edge as he laid out the airline's growing concerns about the incident involving the Carter family. "You must understand, Ava," Mr. Stevens began, his voice low and deliberate. "Your actions have sparked more than just a media frenzy. We are dealing with forces that you may not fully grasp." His words, while couched in corporate caution, struck Ava like a thunderbolt. She had always believed in her duty to serve and protect, but now it seemed that her commitment to truth and justice had inadvertently set off a chain of events that threatened to engulf her entire career. The meeting left her reeling, the faces around the table a blur of conflicting emotions. Some colleagues offered silent support, while others cast wary glances, as if weighing the risk of association. Ava's inner turmoil deepened. She wondered if her desire to stand by her truth was slowly alienating her from those who once believed in her. The mounting pressure was not only external, but also gnawed at her internally, as doubts and fears crept into the corners of her mind. Later that day, as Ava navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the terminal, her phone buzzed with another message, a brief text that read, "The truth is deeper than you imagine. Look where you least expect." The cryptic message did little to calm her racing thoughts. Instead, it added another layer of mystery to an already complex puzzle. With each new challenge, the stakes were raised, and Ava felt as if she were walking a tightrope suspended over a chasm of secrets. Her path soon crossed with Daniel, the soft-spoken passenger whose earlier conversation had hinted at hidden alliances within the airline's inner circle. In a quiet corner of the terminal, away from prying eyes, Daniel revealed a startling piece of information. "Ava," he said, lowering his voice so that only she could hear, "the Carter family incident was only the beginning. There is a plan in motion, a plan that involves many of us, even those we trust the most." His eyes were intense as he continued, "I've seen files, confidential documents that suggest high-level conspiracies within the company. They are using the incident as a distraction, a way to shift blame, and tighten their grip on power." The revelation hit Ava like a tidal wave. The airline she had known, with its rigid rules and expected order, was now a theater for shadowy maneuvers and backroom deals. Daniel's words painted a picture of a hidden network, one where loyalties were fleeting and betrayals were the norm. As he handed her a small USB drive, his eyes pleaded with hers to understand that this was more than just about a single act of defiance. It was about exposing a far-reaching conspiracy that had ensnared many unsuspecting souls. Ava's hands trembled as she clutched the drive, her mind swirling with questions. Was this evidence enough to bring the truth into the light? And more importantly, who could she trust when the line between friend and foe had blurred beyond recognition? The unexpected twist in the tale was now clear. The forces at work were not merely punitive, but were actively orchestrating a grander scheme that threatened the very fabric of the airline's integrity. That evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows of her modest apartment, Ava sat before her computer, the USB drive connected, and the screen illuminated with files that detailed transactions, hidden meetings, and suspicious transfers of power. The documents were dense, coded in corporate jargon, yet the underlying narrative was unmistakable, a web of deceit that reached deep into the highest echelons of the company. Every file seemed to whisper secrets of bribery, collusion, and betrayal. It was a mosaic of corruption, and at its center lay the Carter family, whose true role was now more sinister than mere ownership. In the midst of her analysis, a sudden, unexpected video call flashed on her screen. It was Elena, her trusted mentor, her confidant through years of shared struggles. But the expression on Elena's face was far from reassuring. "Ava, I need to tell you something important," Elena began, her voice trembling. "I've been investigating these matters too, and I discovered something that might change everything." Elena hesitated, then continued, "There are hints that someone within our own ranks is working with the higher-ups, someone who has been feeding them information. I fear that this betrayal runs deeper than we imagined." Ava's heart sank as the implications of Elena's words set in. The thought that someone close to her could be complicit in this web of lies was almost too much to bear. The mounting challenges now took on a personal dimension, a profound sense of isolation in a world where every ally might conceal a hidden agenda. With each revelation, the trust that had once been her refuge seemed to crumble, replaced by a harsh reality where betrayal lurked in every shadow. As the days wore on, Ava found herself caught in a relentless storm of mounting challenges. The airline's internal investigation tightened its net, and whispers of her involvement in a conspiracy began to circulate among the staff. She was being cornered not only by the company's powerful figures, but also by a growing sense of self-doubt. Every phone call, every covert meeting, only deepened the mystery and the mounting pressure on her shoulders. In one particularly tense moment, as she stood in a dimly lit corridor waiting for a discreet meeting with an anonymous source, Ava's eyes met those of a stranger in a dark coat. The stranger's gaze was steady, almost unnervingly calm, and in that fleeting moment, Ava sensed an unsettling familiarity, a feeling that she had been marked, that her every move was now under scrutiny. The stranger's presence was a silent confirmation that the web of conspiracy was far more intricate than she had ever imagined, and that her every decision was being watched. The unexpected twist had changed the trajectory of her journey. No longer was her battle simply about righting an injustice. It had evolved into a fight for survival against a powerful network that thrived on secrecy and betrayal. With each passing hour, the stakes escalated, and Ava was forced to confront a terrifying truth. The forces aligned against her were far more dangerous and far-reaching than she had ever anticipated. In that crucible of mounting challenges, Ava's determination hardened. She realized that to unearth the truth and protect those who had been ensnared in this grand scheme, she would need to risk everything: her job, her reputation, and perhaps even her life. The unexpected twist had not only deepened the mystery, but had also forced her to choose between the comfort of ignorance and the perilous path of truth. Standing at the crossroads of loyalty and betrayal, Ava resolved to forge ahead. With every secret revealed, every new piece of evidence uncovered, she inched closer to the heart of the conspiracy. The mounting challenges were no longer just obstacles. They were the very catalysts that would propel her toward a reckoning with the hidden forces that had long manipulated the lives of so many. And as the rain fell outside in a steady, relentless rhythm, Ava knew that her next move could very well be the turning point that would change everything. Ava's heart pounded as she stepped into the cold night, leaving behind the familiar hum of the terminal. The rain fell in steady sheets, each drop reflecting the harsh glare of streetlights and the weight of what was to come. Tonight, every breath she took was thick with tension and the promise of change. She moved quickly through the darkened corridors of the abandoned hangar, a place once filled with the sound of busy workers and roaring engines, now silent but for the whisper of water dripping from rusted metal. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of oil and old secrets. The vast space was illuminated by a few flickering fluorescent bulbs, casting long, wavering shadows on the concrete floor. Ava's eyes scanned the room, every detail etched in her memory. It was here that she had arranged a final meeting with those who had helped her uncover the truth. The USB drive, the notes, and the pieces of a larger puzzle were all with her. Now, she was ready to expose the corruption that had twisted the fate of the airline and shattered her life. Ava's footsteps echoed softly as she approached a makeshift table in the center of the hangar. There, seated in a semicircle, with a few allies she trusted, Daniel, whose quiet strength had guided her through uncertainty, Marcus, whose earlier warnings had come to mean more than he'd ever admitted, and Elena, whose calm determination served as a beacon in these dark times. Their faces, lit by the pale light, were serious and resolute. "We have little time," Daniel said quietly, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "The higher-ups are moving fast. They know we are gathering evidence, and they will not let this go unchallenged." Marcus nodded, his eyes dark with worry. "I've heard whispers that more people in the company are turning against us. We are outnumbered, but we must stand together." His voice was low, the sound almost lost in the drip of water echoing around them. Elena leaned forward, her gaze fixed on Ava. "This is our moment. We have uncovered proof that the Carter family and their hidden partners have been manipulating everything from the shadows. Tonight, we bring the truth into the light, no matter what it costs us." Ava's mind raced back to the moment when she had first learned that the Carters were not just influential guests, but the true owners of the airline. The shock had been overwhelming then, a twist that shattered every assumption she had about duty and loyalty. Now that twist had grown into a full-blown confrontation. The revelation that the entire system was built on lies, secret deals, and betrayals weighed heavily on her, yet it also filled her with a burning resolve. She would not be silenced. Before any of them could speak further, the sound of heavy footsteps reverberated through the vast space. The door at the far end of the hangar creaked open, and a tall figure stepped into the light. It was Malcolm Carter, his presence both commanding and unsettling. His dark eyes swept over the gathered group with a mix of anger and disappointment. Behind him, Clarissa Carter stood silently, her expression unreadable, and Jamal lingered at the back, his youthful face hardened by the gravity of the situation. "Miss Ava," Malcolm's voice was deep and measured as he addressed her, "I have been expecting you." There was no warmth in his tone, only a cold, calculated calm that sent shivers down her spine. Ava met his gaze without flinching. "I did what I believed was right," she said steadily. "You have hidden the truth for too long. It is time for the world to know what lies behind the facade of this company." Clarissa's eyes narrowed, and the air seemed to tighten with every word. "You think you can change the way things have always been?" she asked, her voice low, but filled with a biting edge. "You are but one person, and your actions have consequences far beyond your understanding." The tension in the room grew almost unbearable. Marcus's hand tightened around his coat, and even Daniel's steady voice wavered with the intensity of the moment. The hall was filled with a mix of defiance and dread. For a long, heavy moment, no one spoke, as if the very air was waiting for the next move in this dangerous game. Then, in an unexpected twist, a hidden door on the side of the hangar burst open. A group of uniformed figures rushed in, their faces masked with determination. They were agents of the internal investigation, people who had secretly allied with those who sought to dismantle the corrupt system from within. Their arrival was like a bolt of lightning, shattering the fragile standoff and forcing everyone to confront the truth. Malcolm's face contorted with shock and anger. "You traitors!" he roared, stepping forward to block the agents. His voice was full of fury, a stark contrast to the calm he had maintained before. "You have no right to interfere." Elena's eyes blazed with quiet triumph as she stepped forward to join the agents. "It is you who has betrayed the trust of every employee, every passenger," she said firmly. "Tonight, the truth will be set free." Ava felt her heart swell with a mix of fear and relief. The unexpected arrival of these agents shifted the balance of power. The hidden forces that had once seemed invincible now stood exposed, their dark secrets laid bare. The agents began collecting documents and securing electronic evidence that confirmed the conspiracy, their movements quick and methodical. The USB drive in Ava's hand was placed on the table, its contents now verified by those who had risked everything to bring justice. Jamal, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward hesitantly. His voice was soft but carried a weight of regret. "I never wanted any of this," he confessed. "I only wanted to help my family, but I see now that the cost has been too high." His words resonated with a painful honesty that cut through the tension like a knife. The confrontation reached its peak as Malcolm, unable to regain control, was forced to stand aside. His eyes, once filled with the cold confidence of power, now burned with a desperate fury. "You think you can expose us and expect everything to remain unchanged," he spat. "The world is not ready for the truth. You will regret this betrayal." Ava stepped forward, her voice trembling yet resolute. "I have no regrets," she said, her eyes fixed on Malcolm. "The truth may be painful, but it is the only way to heal the wounds that have festered for far too long. I choose to stand by what is right, even if it means facing the consequences." As the agents secured the area and the evidence was taken into custody, the hangar filled with a surreal calm. The storm outside seemed to subside, as if nature itself recognized the gravity of the moment. The flickering lights steadied, and for a brief moment, the world held its breath. The clash of loyalties and the struggle for justice had reached its climax, a turning point from which there could be no return. In the aftermath of the confrontation, the heavy burden of secrets and lies began to lift. Ava, though shaken, felt a strange sense of clarity. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and risks, but the truth was finally out in the open. The conspiracy that had threatened to engulf her life had been exposed, and in that exposure lay the promise of a new beginning. Standing in the middle of the hangar, surrounded by allies and former adversaries, Ava took a deep breath. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle outside, and the soft hum of the night whispered of hope and renewal. The struggle was far from over, but in that charged moment, she knew that the fight for justice had only just begun. Every drop of rain, every flicker of light, was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, truth could shine through. With renewed determination, Ava resolved to continue her battle, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered under the weight of corruption. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was no longer alone. Together with her allies, she would work to rebuild a system based on honesty and respect, a system where the voices of the oppressed would no longer be silenced by those in power. The night's events would echo for a long time, a powerful reminder that sometimes the most intense battles lead to the brightest dawns. And as Ava stepped forward into the uncertain future, her heart was filled with a quiet hope that even the deepest wounds could heal in the light of truth. The morning after the tumultuous night, the first pale light of dawn broke over the city. Ava stepped out of the building into the cool, early air, her mind still swirling with the memories of what had transpired. The hangar, now silent and deserted, stood as a solemn reminder of the battle fought just hours before. The agents had secured the evidence, and the internal investigation had been launched with an urgency that promised sweeping changes. As Ava walked along the empty corridor of the terminal, each step echoed softly against the polished floor, a quiet counterpoint to the storm of revelations that upended her life. In the days that followed, whispers of the scandal spread like wildfire throughout the airline. The evidence against the Carter family and their hidden partners was undeniable, and soon, news outlets began to report on the dark underbelly of corruption that had long been concealed behind sleek uniforms and pristine boarding passes. Malcolm Carter was detained for questioning, and his once commanding presence now seemed diminished as he faced the consequences of his actions. Clarissa and Jamal, too, found themselves isolated, their eyes haunted by the realization that the legacy of power they had built was now crumbling. Within the walls of the airline's headquarters, a new order was beginning to take shape. The board had convened an emergency meeting, and even those who had once been loyal were now forced to reckon with the truth. For Ava, the transformation was bittersweet. Her actions, born of a deep sense of duty and moral conviction, had brought the corruption to light. Yet, she also felt the heavy burden of the choices she had made, a burden that weighed on her every thought. Ava often found herself wandering the quiet corridors of the now unsettled terminal, reflecting on the events that had reshaped her world. One afternoon, as she sat by a large window watching the subdued activity of airport staff, she recalled the nervous tension of that fateful night. The memory of the handwritten note that had first warned her, "Every decision has its echo. Stand by your truth, but be ready for the shadows it may awaken," lingered in her mind like an echo of the past. It was as if that simple message had been the first drop in a cascade of consequences that led to this profound moment of reckoning. Her colleagues, too, were in a state of quiet recovery. Marcus, who had once expressed fear and uncertainty, now offered a steady presence by her side. "I always believed we did what was right," he said one day, his voice soft but determined, "and even though the cost was high, your courage has shown us that truth is worth fighting for." His words provided Ava with a fragile sense of comfort, even as she knew that the road ahead would remain steep and uncertain. Daniel, whose quiet inquiries had first hinted at the hidden alliances within the airline, continued to work behind the scenes to ensure that every piece of evidence was properly catalogued. His persistence reminded Ava that even in the darkest times, there were those who quietly supported the fight for justice. Elena, ever the steady guide, maintained a calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos of recent events. She often met with Ava in a small, secluded room where they discussed not only the practical next steps, but also the deeper meaning of their actions. "We have unearthed a truth that was buried deep for too long," Elena would say, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and resolve. "Now we must let it breathe so that we can rebuild from the ruins." In the wake of the scandal, the airline announced sweeping reforms. New leadership was put in place, and committees were established to review every aspect of the company's practices. It was a tentative step toward healing, yet Ava sensed that the wounds would take time to mend. There was no instant fix to the betrayal and greed that had been so deeply ingrained. As the media continued to report on the unfolding drama, Ava watched from the sidelines, a reluctant hero who had never sought fame, but whose name was now inextricably linked with a moment of transformative change. Amid the legal battles and corporate restructuring, Ava found solace in small moments of reflection. One crisp morning, she walked through a park near the terminal, the gentle rustle of leaves underfoot reminding her that nature too goes through cycles of decay and renewal. Sitting on a weathered bench, she allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. "I did what I had to do," she murmured to the quiet air, "but I wonder if the price of truth is always this high." The question lingered without an answer, a silent testament to the complexity of her journey. Her inner voice acknowledged both the satisfaction of having done what was right and the lingering ache of loss of innocence, loss of certainty, and perhaps even loss of parts of herself that had once believed in a simpler world. As the investigation deepened, Ava began to see hints of hope emerging from the chaos. Former employees who had long suffered under the weight of the corrupt regime now felt empowered to speak up. New policies were drafted to ensure greater transparency, and a cautious optimism began to replace the pervasive cynicism of the past. Yet, for all the progress, the scars remained, visible reminders that the battle for justice was never truly over. In quiet moments, Ava would return to the now-abandoned hangar where the confrontation had reached its climax. The space, once filled with tension and conflict, had become a place of reflection. Standing in the dim light, she could almost hear the echoes of voices long silenced, the murmurs of betrayal, the cries for redemption, and the soft whispers of hope that had been born in the midst of chaos. It was there that she felt a deep connection to the idea that every end, no matter how painful, also carried the seed of a new beginning. The resolution of the central conflict had brought many changes, but it had not erased the questions that lay beneath. Ava knew that while the evidence had dismantled a corrupt empire, the structures of power were intricate and enduring. The truth she had uncovered was only a part of a larger tapestry, a tapestry woven with threads of human ambition, regret, and the perpetual struggle for justice. In that awareness, she found a strange kind of peace, for she realized that some ambiguities were meant to linger, inviting each person to reflect on their own part in the ongoing dance of right and wrong. In the end, Ava's journey was not defined by a single act of defiance, but by the quiet courage to pursue truth even when it brought great personal cost. Her story had reached a resolution, yet the echoes of that resolution would continue to reverberate in every life touched by the events of that fateful night. As she walked forward into the uncertain future, Ava carried with her both the scars and the hope of renewal, a reminder that the quest for justice is a path with no final destination, only endless steps toward a better, if ever elusive, tomorrow. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.